Excellent. So to kick it off, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Forge Online Bootcamp. My name is Michael Beale. I am one of the Forge developer advocates. And today we're going to go through day 2 of our bootcamp training. So this is a 4-day bootcamp. That's four tutorials. And it's basically following the learnforge.autodesk.io material. And there's 2 tracks, 2 parallel tracks. There's a track for programmers that are coding in Node.js, and another track that's running on as we speak right now for .NET. And so that's going to be the back-end server components. Front-end server components, it's JavaScript, I'm afraid. It's going to be JavaScript for everybody. There are 4 sessions per day. I'm going to cover the times in a second. And during that session, we're going to get the environments set up, and we're going to do some coding, and I'm going to be here to answer any questions you have, any problems you have. I'll be around, and I'll be, jumping in, coming to help you out. And if for some reason I need to share your computer screen or somehow walk you through a problem, just click on the share button. I'll make the button available, and then you can share the screen, and we can work through any areas or problems you're having. So between these sessions, there's going to be some long breaks. You'll get a chance to follow what I've done and try it out yourself, code what you need to code, and then any questions you have, you can submit them afterwards. Okay, so this is day 2. It's Tuesday, September 14th here on the West Coast in the US. I'm in San Francisco area, so this is West Coast time or Pacific Standard Time. And Tuesday, we're going to be covering accessing designs with Fusion Team, BIM 360 Docs, or ACC. Yesterday, some of you may have already started the day 1 bootcamp, in which case you probably worked with Jaime and you were using two-legged authentication. And so that was Monday, yesterday. You were working with two-legged authentication, uploading, translating, previewing 2D, 3D designs. Jaime tells me it went really well. You guys did a great job. So today I'm hoping I can get you to the next step. This one's going to be pretty complicated. And so I'm going to try to do my best to help you guys through it. Okay. So day 2. You guys ready? You got some coding music ready to go? I know I have. So day 2, we're going to be doing accessing designs, Fusion Team, BIM 360 Docs, or ACC, Autodesk Construction Cloud. So what exactly does that mean? Well, let's start with an example. Let's start with BIM 360 Docs. So what I'm going to do is do a share of portion of my screen here, just to give you guys a quick example. BIM 360 Docs. So here it is here. If you guys are familiar with it, feel free to raise your hand. Oh, I've got a chat question. The sound is too low. No problem. I will fix that. Easy peasy. Oh, it is too low. You're right. Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2, and let's get it about here. That's about right. And just to really bump it up, I will make sure I've got my microphone a little bit closer too. Okay, so with a bit of luck, I sound a lot clearer. What do you think? Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes, better, excellent. Cool, thanks guys. Let's start with a BIM 360 Docs example. So I got BIM 360 Docs, here's the web page, but what does it actually look like? So BIM 360 Docs, this is BIM 360 Docs here. I have got some files uploaded to it. So think of it, on the most simple way of thinking about it is it's like Dropbox. I can store my Revit files, my Inventor files, my AutoCAD files. I can store any file there, just like BIM 360 Docs. And I can share them with a team of people, and my team also upload their files. And just like Dropbox, we share things and we collaborate and we do lots of work together. So bin 360 docs, this is it here. I have got a file here. Look, it's the Revit retail file. And this is a retail store design. I can see the 3D model here. I can do some fun things with it. I can get rid of the, I can get rid of this rooftop. I'll just hide that element, and let's maybe hide a little bit more. And I can zoom into this store. Cool, I've got some table here, and let's walk around. So now I can, navigate around inside this retail store, and my architects and my designers can decide what this retail store should look like and move things around. So yeah, this is bin 360 docs at its most basic level. But how do I, maybe I want to 3D print this design. I want to get a 3D printer and I want to print it out, but I don't have a 3D printer. But maybe there's a Kinko's down the street that can print things out, and they've got a 3D printer. So maybe I want to somehow get this retail.revit file and send it to a company that does 3D printing. How can I do that? And that's kind of where this comes in, this authentication piece, the three-legged Oauth 2 protocol kicks in. We have a file store system, and we have Kinko's down the street who can do 3D printing. But how do I get this? How do I give permission of this Revit file to Kinko's so they can 3D print a file? So this is what Oauth is kind of all about. And that's kind of why we're here today. So think of Oauth as kind of like the valet key to your car. So you've got a car, that the car is yours, and you want to somehow let the valet take your car and drive it and park it for you. And so that's kind of what Oauth is. We're sort of giving permission and access to someone else, and you're giving them permission to your car. And that's kind of what I was getting at with bin 360. You have a whole lot of files on bin 360, a Revit file, and you want this 3D printer company, Kinko's, to 3D print that file. And so you have to somehow give permission to that 3D printer company to access your file. And we do that with Oauth. We provide a login box that allows the 3D printer company to display a 3D login box, to display a login box, which lets the user log into their account, give permission to the 3D printer company, and then that 3D printer company can now access the Revit file and do some processing, and then finally 3D print your retail store in this case. And that's kind of the gist of it. And that's probably what you're wanting to learn how to do today. How can I build a website? How can I be this 3D printer company and somehow access bin 360 customers' Revit files or Inventor files or AutoCAD files? How can I access those and do something useful with them and build a business out of it? Your business would be the 3D printing company business. You print 3D things, and you want to somehow leverage bin 360. This is how you do it. So this is what we're going to be building for today. This is your 3D printer company webpage. It looks pretty basic, but this is it. There's a login button. You click on that. That login button's the bin 360 login button. And what does it do? It lets your user log in with their username and password, and then it gives your company, or gives your server, access to the files and folders inside bin 360. And so you can display them or do whatever you need to do, maybe 3D print them. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing today. This is the application we're going to build. On the left, you can see a tree view, and this tree view is based on JS tree, JavaScript control. And what it does is you give it a JSON object of a tree structure. So for example, files and folders and versions. You can see here I'm sort of clicking down and clicking on a version. And the JS tree control is going to render that for us. You give it some icons as well, and it's going to render this trigger control on the left, and that's what we're going to use to navigate through the BIM 360 files and folders. And that's done through the Forge platform. The Forge platform provides the APIs to, just like a directory service, it can display folders, and it can display files, and it can also display versions. And so on the right-hand side is the Forge viewer itself, which I kind of showed you in BIM 360. So this is the Forge viewer on the right-hand side, and we are going to give the Forge viewer a special URN, and that URN, Forge viewer knows what to do with. It knows how to load all the 3D bits and pieces to display it and get that 3D view or 2D view of that particular drawing. So this is it. This is the basic thing. There's a little bit of CSS styling. We've got a header, we've got a left pane and a right pane, but all of that's going to be what we're going to cover by the end of today. So it looks pretty challenging, right? Forge viewer here again. This is the same Forge viewer, so we'll be getting to play around a little bit with Forge viewer. All of these same controls are available. This is pretty stock standard Forge viewer stuff. And so we'll be doing the same thing in our boot camp today. Okay, so how on earth are we going to do this, I should say? So we're going to do it in 4 parts. And we're going to give you plenty of time to look around the code, get things working, try a couple different things out. And it's going to be breaking into basically kind of 2-hour sessions. So from 8 a.m. to 8:30, which is what we are doing now, I'm going to do the introduction, which is what I'm doing now. And then in a minute, I'm going to start going through the setup process. Then I'm going to hand it off to you guys after 8:30. From between 8:30 and 10 a.m., you guys are going to get to set up your environment and get things going. Then we're going to come back at 10 a.m. So I'm on the West Coast time. This is all PST time. 10 a.m., we're going to start covering the next section. And this is where we start coding the server piece. We're going to cover the basic server and authentication. And then session 3, we'll come back at 12 o'clock, just before lunch. And then I'm going to cover that navigation piece on the left-hand side you saw. That was where we list the files and folders and projects. And we also got to cover a little bit on the user information. When somebody logs in, they have a little icon of their profile picture, and we're going to take a look at that as well. And then finally, we're going to really wrap things up at 2 o'clock. We come back at 2 o'clock, and I'm going to cover the last piece, which is the right-hand pane, which is where we load the model in Forge Viewer. All right. You guys excited? You guys ready? All right, let's do it. So, prerequisites. With a bit of luck, you've already started from yesterday's session on covering how to set up a Forge account, how to create a Forge app, and how you are, what you're going to be accessing. So understanding what BIM 360 is and what you want to access from it. And let's start with the development environment. So first thing you're going to need to do, if you haven't already done this, I'll just very briefly cover this, is you'll need to install Node.js Runtime. So you're going to go to Node.js. I'll just open that link, and you'll download. I'm on a Mac, but if you're on Windows, it's going to display Windows here or Linux. You're going to download the LTS version. That's the long-term stable version of Node.js. Download, install that, run it, and the next part is you're going to download and install Visual Studio Code. And so click on this link or go to code.visualstudio.com. Let's make sure there's no questions yet. With a bit of luck, you've already got to this point, and you've got to this screen and you've clicked on download Visual Studio Code. You've downloaded and installed it. Okay. And if you've got that far, which would be awesome, you should get to a point where you see something like Visual Studio Code here. Here's Visual Studio Code we're running. And I'm going to open a terminal down the bottom. So here we are. I can open a terminal directly inside Visual Studio Code, and you should be able to type Node. And if you've got everything installed and running correctly, you should be able to get to this point, opening a terminal, typing in Node, and you'll see welcome to Node, and then whatever version that you're currently running should appear. Oops. Okay. So that's what the environment, the basic environment we want to get to. The next part we want to make sure you've got is the Forge account. So while that's downloading and installing, so sometimes those files can be pretty big for setting up Visual Studio Code and for downloading Node.js. While we're waiting for that to download, let's make sure we have a Forge account. So to do that, I'm going to just start from scratch here and send you over to a browser link. You're going to go to forge.autodesk.com, and I'm going to log out just so you can see what's going on. And you're going to see a page like this, Forge cloud-based developer platform. And if you haven't already signed up from yesterday, click on the sign up, try Forge. If you've already signed up for Forge and it's an account that has expired, what I would do is sign up again, but with a different email address. You're currently in development phase. It's not like suddenly your 3D printer business is up and running and you're making tons and tons of customer transactions. So you're not exactly in that position yet to be continuing to pay for Forge right now. You're just a developer and you're prototyping things. So feel free to sign up with another email address and get those 100 cloud credits so you can try this system out. And once you've done that, you should be able to just sign in. I'm going to quickly sign in with my details. And I have already logged in before, so it's going to remember my username, password details. And then we'll click on Go to My Apps. And we're going to create a new Forge app. So I click on Create Forge App. Now you're going to notice slightly from before, you're going to notice slightly different change. Just to make life a little bit easier on what modules for the Forge platform to choose, we've got this new application type user interface. And there are 3 different options here. Really quickly, a traditional web app is what we will be building. Our web page, what you saw before in our demo link, sorry, in our intro slide here, this application, this is a traditional web app. And so we're going to be building this one. Server-side web apps that can securely store secrets, store 2-legged and 3-legged authentication. This is the one. Now, there's some alternative stuff here. If you're doing some work with, say, a Revit plugin or an Inventor or AutoCAD plugin, you'd probably be looking at something like this, or maybe an iPad app. And then the last piece is server-to-server stuff. Maybe you're doing some design automation for Revit or AutoCAD, which is covered later this week in the sessions. You'll be clicking on this one. So let's start with the one that we will be using. Traditional web app, click on that one. And let's start with a tutorial name. I'm going to use Tuesday, day 2 as my name. And I'll click on create, make sure it's unique. Great, so I've created a new app successfully. Now, with a bit of luck, you've got here, and you've got a client ID, which you're going to need, and a client secret, which we're also going to need. And then the other key little bit of information is this callback URL. Now, I'm going to explain the callback URL in a bit more detail later, but just to get things moving, I am going to mention what you need for this. So our session is following the learnforge.autodesk material, which is this web page. learnforge.autodesk.io. So if you haven't been there already, let's move you guys over to this web page, and this is basically what we'll be following for the day. So before you start coding, this is exactly what you need to get started: creating a Forge account, how to create an app. And the key little bit of information that I was going to point you guys to was this callback URL. Copy and paste. Copy and paste this URL into. I can get my page back. There it is. Copy and paste this URL into your new app. So when you've created your app, client ID, client secret, and then in the callback URL here, we're just going to go and quickly edit that. Click on it, scroll down to the bottom, click on edit, and then in the callback URL, you're going to change that, copy and then paste the localhost 3000 API Forge callback Oauth. It's a structure that we came up with for our tutorials. Hopefully that's not too verbose. All right, once you've done that, user account deletion, no, we're not deleting anything. So click on save and we are good to go. Excellent. So we want to copy and paste the client ID and secret and keep that stashed away in a simple notepad. So let's just pop that here, and I'm going to copy this one. And then I'm going to regenerate it later once we finish this tutorial. Okay, so there's my key and secret. I'm going to need those. That's all I'm going to need. And we're done with creating our Forge app. Okay. And let's keep it going. All right. So that is pretty much what we wanted to cover so far. We wanted to get you to that point. That was my demo time. So that was showing you guys creating the setup, creating a Forge account, setting up access to BIM 360 and your application, and setting up your development runtime and editor. I do believe we've got one more thing to set up here. I just wanted to make sure. One other key piece of information, and let's make sure I got this one. Yeah. That should do it. And then we'll get you guys over to, once you've finished doing that one, should get ourselves up to this point here. So this is viewing BIM 360 files and models, Learn Forge, and clicking on View BIM 360 and Fusion models. We should want to get to this point here. Alrighty. Next question for you guys is, if you have a BIM 360 account set up or a Fusion team account set up, let me know if you do not, and I can try to help you guys out with that. Okay. Excellent. So, you guys ready? Alrighty. Let's, I'll let you guys get to doing that. And there's going to be a Q&A button you can click on, which I think some of you have already discovered. Clicking on that, that will notify me that you guys have got a question and that there's something you need some help with. Just click on that Q&A button. I'll be checking occasionally just to make sure there's nothing stopping you guys. And yeah, feel free to submit your questions. I will be back in at 10 o'clock, so in about an hour and a half, and we'll start with the next session, which is basic server and authentication. Alrighty. See you guys soon. Recording. Really quickly, for those who are just thinking out loud, if you don't already have a BIM 360 account to test with, it may be worth signing up for an A360 Autodesk account. This is similar to BIM 360, but it's much more lightweight, and it's free to share, view, and review files. So that's another alternative. if you have not got a BIM 360 account to test already. This is an alternative, quick and easy alternative. So let me know in the chat window or the Q&A if you want me to, oops, I just realized I'm not sharing the screen. Let me share. Sorry about that. Here we go. This is A360. This is an alternative hub. So like Fusion Team, BIM 360, ACC, these are all hubs. A360 is a lightweight share, view, review kind of data storage system. So this is an alternative. If you don't have a BIM 360 account, you can try this one out. Sign in, try now. Those will get you there. And again, this is a hub, and so that will appear in the application on the left-hand panel of our demo, this one. So you'll see a list of hubs. So hubs are things like BIM 360 or A360. You can see there's an A360 hub there and a BIM 360 hub. Or if you're using Fusion, you'll see a Fusion hub. Yes, if you don't already have a BIM 360 account, it's going to take a while to get that set up today. And this may be a simpler alternative. You can just simply sign up today. Cool. Alrighty. No problem, Young Chul. I can see you responded. Thanks. All right. I'll talk to you guys in about an hour and a half. See you at 10 o'clock. Zoom recording. Great. It's glad to see everyone is back and it's all working. Fantastic. I do see a quick chat message. I'm not able to hear. Okay. I'm going to just double check again with Marvin. Hi, Marvin. Can you hear me now? Sound is good. Okay, great. I am going to keep on moving. Marvin, just send me another message to let me know you can hear things. But just so you guys know, this is being recorded and we will be sending out the recordings at the end. Okay, so Marvin is going to just try rejoining. So let's just wait a minute. And while we're waiting for Marvin, I thought I'm going to just quickly entertain you guys with something super flashy. I'm just assuming it's going to be flashy. I don't actually know. Let's have a look. This is happening. Okay. Yeah, so this is what we're missing out on. Or not, maybe. Anyway, just wait for Marvin. There we go. Looks like he's back. Cool. Marvin, fantastic. Okay, guys. So this is part 2, session part 2. And this one's going to be pretty quick. I mean, this one's going to be pretty busy. So if you guys thought you had a lot of time to get a coffee and all that sort of stuff, well, this session, you guys are going to be working a little bit harder this time. Promise you. Okay, so to kick it off, we are going to be covering basic server and authentication. Whoops. And first of all, are there any questions which I didn't cover during the Q&A section? Just quick, any questions that weren't there? So far, so good. Excellent. So in this one, and then there was a question about NPM. So here it is. Session 2, we are going to start with a new NPM project. We're going to install the dependencies. We're going to jump into Visual Studio Code, and then we're going to focus all of our work through VS Code. It's just so much easier. We'll create a launch configuration. We'll set up a config file. That's where those key and secret we got from session 1. We're going to put those in there. Oh, actually, we're actually going to put them in a config file, the launch JSON config file. But config.js file is where it's going to get pulled from. Then we're going to start with the actual server, and that's where we'll create a Node.js Express server, and we'll put that code into start.js. And then finally, we start getting into the nitty-gritty. Once we've actually got our Express server serving our web page, we want to start creating some routes. And in particular, we're going to add an authentication endpoint and a couple of other ones. And I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to test that with a curl command. So we'll start to see it actually working. I'll set some breakpoints and show off a little bit of Visual Studio Code workflows. And yeah, I think we should be good to go. This is what we are going to be doing. You guys ready? Demo time? All right, let's do it. Let's kick it off. So to get started, you have your viewer, your Forge app here with your details. Keep those handy because we're going to need them. All right, so you can follow along again in the learnforge.autodesk.io page. And we are kicking it off here. Click on View BIM 360 and Fusion Models. And you can read all of this, but we're just going to jump ahead and we are going to click on this thing here, Create a Server. If you get stuck at all, or if you come back to this and you don't want to have to type in anything, really quick and easy way is to just jump straight into the GitHub repo here. And this will take you to the full sample code, all of the stuff that we're going to be typing today. You can find cheat sheets and look at all of the answers here, so we can jump ahead. But we're not going to do that. We are going to go through it. Let's do it. So to start off, we're going to click on Create a Server. And that's going to ask us what language. We want to use .NET. So Node.js. So let's click on that one. And that takes you to this page. And this is where we start. We're going to create a new project. So to kick it off, let's open Visual Studio Code. Here we are, it's empty. And we are going to create a new folder. So I'm going to click on File and I'm going to say New File. Oh, actually, not New File. I am going to create, go to my terminal, I should say, New Terminal. And I am going to create a project, and I'm going to call it Tutorial Session. That's Tutorial 2. Alrighty. So hop into there. There's my folder. And I'm just going to open that folder really quickly. So there it is there. Open Tutorial 2. Excellent. Click on Open. Now you'll notice Visual Studio Code did a quick refresh. It's now in this workspace. It's now in our project folder called Tutorial 2. I'm going to open that terminal up again. Make sure we're all good. And you can see there's my folder, nothing in it. So let's put these kind of next to each other so we can follow along a little bit easier. So the first thing we're going to do in your terminal is we're going to type in npm init. And that's going to create a new npm package.json file. And we're just going to press enter all the way through. It's asking for a package name. I'm just going to hit enter, description, starting point, all of that. You can fill those in if you want. And is this okay? Yes, it is. And that's created my first file, the package.json file. There it is there. You can sort of see the contents of it, all the stuff that we had in there before. Next, we are going to install some dependencies. So let's go ahead and install Express. We are going to need cookie session management. And I'll explain a little bit of why we want that when we get to the code. And we're going to install the Forge APIs. This is an NPM package of our Node.js SDK. Great. So now that's installed, and you can see a couple of dependencies have been added to the package.json file. So when someone else comes to install your server application and they've just got these files, when they type in npm install, it's going to look for these dependencies and it's just going to install it for them. So it keeps life really easy for deployment. Alrighty. Now you can see that updated there. Great. So we have to do a couple of little things to get our the structure of our project up to scratch. First one we want to do is create a couple of folders. We're going to put our web page code into a public folder. That's where we'll put things like our index.html file, our JavaScript files, our CSS files, all the things that we use to serve up static pages on a website. So let's do that first. I'm going to use make dir, and we're going to create public. That's a quick and easy way to make that folder there. And the other folder we want to create here, you can see on the left, is routes. So let's do that. So I like to use the command line. You can also do this from the Visual Studio Code, create new folder if you want. Totally up to you. Alrighty. Now the next part is we want to work with Visual Studio Code. In particular, we want to do some debugging stuff. And Visual Studio Code has this little play button here. This is where we do debugging. And we can put breakpoints and slow down our server and check out what it's doing. It's going to come in really handy when we're debugging problems. So to do that, one quick way is to click on this create launch.json file. So click on the play button, click on this thing here, and then you can see it has got a couple of options here. We want to create a Node.js server application. So let's click on Node.js. Now it's filled in a couple of things for us. It's a type, progressive web app-node. Request is launch. Launch name is called launch program. The one we're interested in, one we want to change right now is the launch program. So we are going to create an initial file for where the server code kicks off. And we're going to keep it consistent with the example. So copy and paste workspace folder, and we're going to call our file name start.js. This is the first file where everything gets kicked off. This is going to be our server file. All right. Now, next part, let's create that start.js file. And I'm going to go through some of these things when we do it. So let's start that. One way you can do it is from the command line. You just simply do start.js. You can see a new file appears, or you can right click, create new file, and then I'll do that in a second and show you that working. Oh, one other thing is make sure you have got a few of these other things in the launch.json file. So in particular, there is this thing called env, and that is short for environment. So when your server starts, when you click on that play button and you start your server here and you click on play, it's going to start, it's going to run the start.js code, whatever's inside there. And it's going to use some environment variables. And we want to define those environment variables with our key and secret that we set up from the Forge application. So in other words, if you can remember, and I'll just zip back over here, if you can remember when we created the Forge app, we got these values here. We are going to copy and paste the client ID and secret into these environment variables. You'll also notice the callback is also there. So we need those three things. Let's grab them. Copy, paste, take a look at that one. Same as before, paste, and the callback URL is already set up. I'm gonna hit save, and we're good to go. That is pretty much all we needed for setting up our launch.json file. Now I'm gonna go back to our roadmap here. Okie dokie. What other things should you need to know there? No, nothing too exciting there. So get that set up. And now the next part is let's work on our start.js file. So at the moment it's empty. We're going to add some of these things. So the first one we're going to add is path, the path the path library. Path library, it's got some great utilities to help with concatenating string paths, file paths based on some strings. It just cleans them up. And obviously we're building an Express app, which is a web server. So we'll need that one. And then we're going to need this other thing called cookie session. Now, cookie session, it's really helpful for managing a cookie that we can cache for a certain amount of time. And that cookie session will use the, it's going to, send the right signals to the browser to tell the browser, hey, remember this cookie, remember this thing, this number, so that if the person who's browsing, if they refresh the web page, instead of it going back to the server and re-logging in again from scratch, use this cookie with a number in it, and a special number. It's got a session token in it, essentially. Use that session token if it hasn't expired. So it saves us having to re-log in from scratch again. And that's what this cookie session library makes life so much easier, getting this to work. So next thing is we're going to define a port. That's going to be where our server runs from. It's going to be running from port 3000, unless our environment variable port changes it to something else like 8080 or whatever you like. We're going to need the config file, which we're going to create in a second. And we're going to check to see if that config file has the credentials we want, which is the client ID and client secret. If that config file doesn't have them, we're going to display an error message and exit. So it's going to say, hey, you don't have you haven't set up the forged client ID or the secret yet. I can't start the server without it. Okay, and then the fun parts. This is where we start to get into the actual web server. So we're going to initialize the Express service, and then we're going to create a static. We're going to serve some static web pages based on the public folder. So that public folder, that folder we created before public, that's where this comes in. And so this is going to take any files that are inside that public folder, and they're going to serve them as a web server. So this here is like the bare minimum you need to supply a static web server. Nearly there, actually. We've just got to add a listener, and then we're good to go. So let's add a few more things. I mentioned the cookie server. The cookie session. Cookie session has some parameters that specify expiry of that token that I mentioned. If that access token that we're sending a secure access token, we want to also send how long to keep it around for. So if it's longer than 14 days, then let the client know that it's about to expire and that they should do something. In other words, they should probably refresh the token. All right. We've got another thing here is to make sure that we don't exceed post requests greater than 50 megabytes. So if you're uploading big files, you probably want to change that. And now we're getting into the routes. Now this is where we are modularizing our server. We're going to add some routes to our server code. Now we could put all of our code and jam it into this single file, but it's not a very clean way to do it. So an alternative way to do this is to modularize it using what we call routes. It's kind of pioneered pretty much by Ruby on Rails. There's a few others that did it, but Ruby on Rails kind of pioneered it. What this does is it says, if you see this request, this HTTP request from a browser or another server, then you're going to load and redirect any of the code that's in this routes Oauth path, in this routes Oauth code. So we're going to create an Oauth file pretty soon, and that's going to get any requests that go to API Forge, and I'll use a curl command to show you this. It's going to route it to our JavaScript code in this Oauth file. All right, so let's do the same thing for two other routes, and I'm going to comment these out just to get started so I can demo a few things for you. And then we want some error handling code. So when something doesn't work, we just want to catch it and display an error message. So things like, browser makes a request for the wrong website, the wrong path name, then we want to have a customized error message and display that. And then lastly, we want to kick the server off. This is the final piece of the puzzle. This tells the server, Express server, to start listening on our port, and then once it's started running, just send a little message to the console to say, "Hey, I'm running on port X." In our case, we are running on port. We're going to be running on port 3000. So we'll define that. We will define the port 3000. In our config.js or in our environments. If the environments aren't there, it is going to use port 3000. Alrighty, so next, we've got our basic start.js file. So far, so good. The next thing we're going to do is create a config.js file. Now, this is useful, not so much in this context, but it's going to be more useful when we start changing the environment around us. So at the moment, we're kind of using the Visual Studio Code debug environment, and that environment is where we set our environment parameters like the forward key and secret. But let's say you deploy this server code onto, say, Heroku, then your environment is going to change. Those environment parameters aren't going to be there because you're not running it in Visual Studio Code anymore. And so we want to redirect we want to modularize where we get those parameters from, try to make them a little bit more secure. In Heroku, you can set up environment variables, and we're going to use the config as our module for pulling credentials. That's essentially what we're doing here. So let's go ahead and create actually I'll do it the Visual Studio Code way. I'm going to create a new file, and we're going to call it config.js. Great. And then there, we are just going to literally just define a JavaScript object. And in there, you're going to see the client ID, client secret, and the callback URL that we specified earlier, excuse me, in the launch.json file, these ones here. All right. So you're going to see those process environment variables are going to match the same ones that we had in the environment variables here. So there's a little bit of a jump, but I think it'll make a little bit more sense in a minute. Okay, so we're exporting the module. It's got our credentials. It's going to pull we're going to have this variable called credentials.clientID, and it's going to have some values taken from the environment, the process environment. In our case, client ID, secret, and callback. And we've defined two different scopes. Now, if you remember yesterday when you were doing two-legged authentication, we had the concept of a scope for the access token. Now, for what we're doing now for the three-legged system, we want to, again, create these two different access tokens based on a scope. We want one access token that we want super duper restricted. And so you can't do anything with that access token if somebody manages to steal it. And so that's where we're going to restrict the access token to what we would call a public access token. And we want to restrict it to being just viewable and read viewables only, nothing else, no other permissions. And that's going to be for things like viewing a Forge Viewer 3D model. Just read. If somebody steals the token, they can't go in and create new accounts and upload new files or any of that stuff. All they can do if they get that access token is to be able to read a viewable. Now let's talk about the other scope, which is what we call the internal scope. Now that's your server. Your server has got like super admin permissions, and we're going to create a second access token that only the server can get, and that scope is going to allow your server to be able to create new buckets, to be able to read them. It's going to be able to upload files and write files, create files, and also read those files. And so that's what our internal scope has these permissions to do. Now you can get a whole lot more information on scopes on the Forge documentation, and that was under the authentication section. I'm not going to go too much into that, further into that one. Okay, so far so good. So if we've got everything right, we should have a folder structure and file set that looks like this. Looks good. Routes is empty, public is empty, and yeah, we're good to go. So next thing is we need to add one more file. Oh, there's that authentication piece. Yeah, you can click on learn more. Just quickly take a quick look at the details on what those scopes mean, and also all of the other options that are available. Okay, so I clicked on, just so you know, I just clicked on the Node.js section of the this tutorial. Now we're doing the routes OAuth file. So we're going to create another file. We're going to jump into the routes folder, and we're going to create Oauth.js. Now you'll see a file appear under here. There it is. Click on that. And I'm going to call out a couple of these things. But for now, I'm just for the sake of time, I'm going to copy to clipboard. I'm just going to paste. And I won't go into all of the things that are going on here, but I'll just go into a couple of things. The first thing is we are going to use Express. We've got a couple of functions we need. We're going to need that config file because of the scope information. And we're going to need this common OAuth file for some utilities, which we're going to code in a second. We've got our router again. Now, this is the interesting part here. With router, I mentioned before in the start.js code that we have this route that goes from, that it does a swizzle. It takes, it checks for API/Forge, and then it will redirect the code to this routes.oauth file, which is this one. And then it's going to look for additional paths in the HTTP request. It's going to look for /callback/OAuth. And when it sees that HTTP request, it's going to jump to this code. And in this case, we're looking for a callback OAuth. We're going to get some parameters that are sitting in the request. We're going to get a session token, which is going to come from our session cookie. And then we're going to set code based on some function call that we're going to create in a minute. And then it's going to do a redirection. And that's part of the three-legged authentication handoff. I'm going to jump to something a little simpler. This is a really simple GET request for providing a URL. So whenever I see this OAuth whenever my server sees this request for OAuth URL, it's going to return back this, it's going to return back essentially this response. It's going to send back effectively a redirection. And I'll show you this running in a second. So this is going to have a string, client ID, and then it's going to pull these values, the client ID that we had in our launch.json file, this one. And then it's going to also concatenate a string with a callback URL and a list of scopes. So if you remember in the config file, get some scopes, it's going to concatenate these. Okay. And then a couple more things. There's a sign out UI endpoint, and that just tells the server to clear out the session. And we've also got OAuth token, and this is to generate an OAuth token. And in particular, it's going to get a public token. And that's it. That's our first file. And now we need to fill in a couple of these methods that we don't have coded up yet. So let's do that next. So to do that, scroll down here to routes/common. So these are just common utilities. So I'm going to do that through this mechanism here. So I need to create a subfolder called common. So I'm going to right click, select that, type in common, and then I'm going to right click again, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call that oauth.js. New file, oauth.js. So far, so good. So I got my empty file. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste this stuff. There's a lot going on here, and we're going to run out of time if we want to test it. Probably one that's worth pointing out is we mentioned before in the OAuth code, there was a method for getting the public token, this one here. So what does this method actually do? So let's just dig a little bit into that one. So go to definition, look at that. Get public token. It's going to, first of all, check if the token has expired in our class, and then it's going to return back the session public token, which it's calculated, and with a value that has expired in. And all of that is all computed in this code here. And what else can I show you that's interesting? Yeah, I think that'll do it. For the refresh token, it will generate a refresh token, basically calling the SDK for refresh token. The refresh token command needs the previous refresh token in order to generate the next refresh token. And while it's doing that, it also can gather an access token. Right, let's talk about testing. So we've now pretty much got all the pieces we need to test our server and get it running. So if you run this, just double check that you've commented out lines 22 and 23 for these two routes if you're going to test this. So I'm about to show you how to test it. So make sure you comment these two lines out. We're going to uncomment those in the next session. But for now, let's just take a little go at running this. So click on the Run and Debug button on the left tab. Just going to move this over to full screen a little bit. No questions. Good. And then up here on the top left, there's a little green button that says Start Debugging. Click on that thing. And if everything goes to plan, you'll see in the debug console something that says Start Listening on port 3000. Now I'm just going to stop this from debugging and I'll start it again. But I'll just show you what happens if for some reason you forget to comment these files. This route is going to look for these two files and it won't find them. And so it'll come up with an error message and then it's going to exit. So it can't find this module. So let's put those back in. I'll just undo and then I'll run the server again. And now let's try something. Let's do a little bit of debugging. So we've got these routes here and we've got the start server here as well. I can put a breakpoint on here, or I should be able to. I should say I can put a breakpoint on these routes, which I'm going to quickly do. In fact, I'm going to put a breakpoint on this one. And we're going to test this endpoint out. So how do we do that? So one way to do it is to pretend to be a browser and send a request to our little server here. Now our server, if you remember correctly, is running on port 3000. So we can send a curl command, just like we can send a curl command to, google.com and it will return a whole lot of HTML. We're going to do the same thing to our server. We're going to say, actually I don't need to do that, HTTP. I can send a request to 3000. Now there's nothing really waiting for it to return something. It's not going to return a web page at this point. So if I hit enter, it's just basically going to say, hey, there's no HTTP file here. Sorry, can't help you. However, we want to actually send something to this endpoint. And to do that, we could just put in what it says here, oauth/URL. But that's not going to work because that's actually not the correct route. You can see there's cannot get that URL. The actual route is with this at the beginning of it, minus the OAuth. So in other words, we're going to put this in front oops, we're going to put this in front and then add this at the end. So it's going to be literally this one, that one, whoops. And then Oauth /URL. Now that's gonna, when I hit enter, watch what happens. It's stalled my endpoint on my command line, but you can see that it suddenly reached my breakpoint inside Visual Studio Code. So I'm just going to step through this and show you what happens. My URL now contains this concatenated string with all of my details. You can see the client ID, etc. And then it's going to send it to my client, which is a curl command line. So if I just hit, I'll just continue here, hit play. Now you can see it's returned back this crazy long string. Perfect. So we know our server's working and it's doing its thing. You can try out the other endpoints if you like. So if you want to test out maybe the sign out endpoint. Oops, sign out. Click on that one. Enter, and you'll see that that also jumps in and it'll do a redirection. Found redirecting to blah. Cool. So that is session 2. So we did cover a fair bit. Feel free to copy and paste, or if you have any questions around this code, I can dig a little bit deeper into it. But this is, now it is your turn. So hopefully you've seen what I've done. You're going to initialize a new NPM project, install dependencies. You're going to create a new launch config with Visual Studio Code. And then you're going to prepare some files, config.js, start.js, and the routes and OAuths. Okay, cool. I think I showed you this kitty cat already. Let's move on to session 3 at 12 o'clock. So guys, over to you. You've got an hour and a half roughly. If you're watching the Apple keynote, let me know if I missed something. Otherwise, we will see you back here at 12 p.m. and we will cover session 3, which is the next fun piece, hubs, projects, and user info. So yeah, take a crack at that one. I'll be listening on the chat window and the Q&A. So if you've got any questions, hit that Q&A button and we will see you back at 12 p.m. Let me try that again. Sorry about that, Lucas. Share screen. Let's go to portion. Okay, so what I was trying to say there was, if you go to the start.js file, you'll see a route here. And just maybe the problem with this is normally it would, when you'd run, say this, oops, when you'd run this command, I'm just going to restart my server. Yeah, when you run this curl command, you know, it would jump here, and I'll just continue it, and you would get this found redirection. But for your case, it looks like maybe the route isn't set up correctly, and so it's almost like there's a typo in this route, and so it can't find it. So now when I restart this service, and then I hit curl and then this endpoint, it says I can't find this command line. What's also interesting is the your command line is showing cannot get / instead of cannot get. It's just showing this one, the cannot get /, which makes me wonder if maybe the curl command you're using is maybe misformed. So double check that as well. And an alternative approach, if for some reason that doesn't work, another thing you can do is just open up a browser and any tab, and then type in localhost 3000, and then API forge OAuth sign out. And you'll see that it'll actually do a redirect. So when I hit this, oh, actually it's gonna at least come up with this message. Cannot get Oh, helps. And that's because I've broken it here. So let me just put it back to what it should be. Hit restart. And when I do this, I should get, close that as well. I should get my found redirecting too. Now when I hit refresh on my browser, oops, it just did a redirection. You can see that it literally just redirected me back to, let's do this again, just to demo it. It's going to redirect me back to this root directory. So that's probably what you're seeing actually. You're getting a redirection. So localhost, and then it's redirecting you back to slash. If you want, try maybe a different endpoint URL rather than sign out, which is cool, but let's try this one instead, Oauth token, just to give you a different experience. So API forge, Oauth token. Oops, does it help if I put in local? And this page isn't working, which is fine. It's got an error message on it. If I put a breakpoint on here, it will fail. So when I hit refresh, it jumps to here. It's going to tell me that it's not authorized. And so it's sending me back a 401, which is what I'm getting here, 401. So this is also working. If I do that from the command line, curl this thing, I should get a 401 as well. But you don't actually see the response. You'd have to do a verbose curl /v for verbose, and you'll see it return the correct 401 unauthorized. So maybe that's the easier thing to actually do, is try adding a /-v into the response. So let me see if I can answer you a little better here. Done. Maybe try Lucas. Try this. Okay. Let me just double check if that has now answered your question. Lucas, if you get a chance when you can, just give me a thumbs up or down, or a thumbs up, raise hand, I should say, if that solved the problem. Cool. Switch back to session 3. So it's 11:59. We'll just wait one more minute, and we will switch over to listing hubs, projects, and user information. Okay. Yeah, so that last session, there was a lot to cover there, but it seems like you guys got through it pretty well, judging from the questions you had. That last part was the trick with using curl and verbose, and just to make sure that curl isn't automatically doing the redirection when you were testing it, and that's why you were seeing that error. Okay, so session 3. You guys ready? Listing hubs, projects, and user information. So what exactly is that? Oh, first of all, there are no questions, so I'll just move on over. I think we answered most of them. So for this next part, we are going to be adding some additional routes. So the ones that we commented out for testing purposes, we're going to bring those 2 routes back. And we're going to be able to create a couple of routes. And what those routes do, we'll list hubs, projects, and files. And after we've done that, we'll add something for the user bit. And that's the part where when somebody logs into your server from their BIM 360 account or A360 or Fusion team, we want a little person's profile picture to appear on the website. And so that way you know that you've logged in as you, and we can do that through the APIs for that one. So where do we start? Well, let's start with, what exactly do I mean by listing hubs, projects, and files? Well, let's kick it off over to sharing the portion of the screen. Let's drop back over to BIM 360 and just take a little look at what's going on here. So listing hubs and projects and files and versions, I can relate that back to BIM 360 here. So BIM 360 is the top level route. It is a hub. That's one example of a hub. Another one is this thing, A360. So I'll just sign into A360 really quickly. A360, very similar to Fusion Team if you're working with manufacturing files. Similar kind of thing. We've got some test files here. I can preview it in the browser. Click on this. It looks like I've got a chair here. All the usual good stuff. Okay, so that's the concept of a hub. BIM 360 is a hub. A360 is a hub. Fusion Team is also a hub. But what about the rest of the hierarchy? Well, the place to look at all of this is, so again, we go to learnforge.autodesk.io and click on List Hubs and Projects. That's the next step in our tutorial here. And there's a tree hierarchy going on. Essentially, the top level tree is the hub. So that would be either BIM 360 or say A360. Underneath the hub are projects. And so I can see my projects here. My project listed here is ADSK Retail. And under project files, I have some folders, project folders, shared, civil, engineering, design, general. And then underneath the this folder here, it gets to a leaf node, which is this file, and this file happens to have some versions. And so I can see we're up to version 3. Here's a couple more versions of the file there. And so that's kind of described in this nice little diagram. Hubs go to projects, projects go to folders, folders can repeat and go to items, to versions, and then finally to the actual core object storage service. So this is very similar to, this is the base level. This is pretty much just like what you remember seeing probably yesterday, where you just had folders and, buckets and, just buckets and files. That's the basics of OSS, very similar to S3 if you're familiar with it. The layer that's added on top of that to add versioning and the concepts of files and folders and projects and hubs. That's the layers that we use in BIM 360 and Fusion Team and A360, etc. So add that little bit of add that extra layer on top of OSS, and that's what you get with BIM 360. So you can manage files, folders, and versions. So that's what we've got here in this BIM 360 here and in A360. And so when you go back to our little preview demo, which I'll show you again, this thing here. So I've got my login box. I log into, say, my my Autodesk account or my BIM 360 account, and it's going to display all of the hubs. So that's going to include BIM 360 and A360 in this case. And it's going to also then let you drill down into folders, projects, folders, files, and then versions of files before we actually get to the URN. Okay, so that's the tree hierarchy essentially that we're going to be following. And to do that, we can find out what's in our account. So if I log in and I get an access token, how do I get that folder list or that list of hubs that I've got? Or how do I get that list of files in a folder? And so I do that through the Forge APIs, and particularly under the Data Management API. And a quick example of, just to give you a quick clue as to what those APIs look like, they're simple GET requests. So you've got, like, for example, you want to get the hub list, then it's simply just a GET request to a Forge URL, projects, version of the API, which is hubs, and that's going to return back a list of hubs. The same with getting documents or files and folders. Whoops. Getting projects, I should say, getting the project list and getting top level folder and then folders, finally items and then versions. So there's lots of little options here, and you can see that's just expanding on this concept here. We can try a quick demo of this function working. I think we can give it a shot. Why not? Let's give it a shot. Let's try for fun. Let me grab an access token from this web page here. I'm going to do that by some magic. It's going to load my 3D file. I'm going to grab the access token that's used in this particular session. And there it is. Just quickly, I better show you what I'm doing. So I grab this really quickly. Go to Postman. And in authorization, I'm going to use my bearer token. Paste that in. I need to provide a forge URL, and I'm not going to do that right now. Oh, am I? Let's go back to versions. There it is. Let's do use project list, I think. No, I'll use hubs. GitHub list with my forge URL and send. Address not found because I put it in wrong. There we go. Access token provided is invalid or expired. Fine, I guess I didn't put the right thing in. Let's do it again. Copy, paste, send. And there we go. I've got a list of hubs. I can see all sorts of things here. So this JSON object is what I want to somehow render into a tree view in a browser. The first thing is I want to just get this JSON request. So to do that, I'm going to need an access token, which I'm going to get through a handshake mechanism. Doing it through the browser here is obviously not going to fly. And then we're just going to literally call get hubs using the Node.js SDK. That Node.js SDK, for reference, if you go to Visual Studio Code, under Node modules, you'll be looking for Forge APIs under source. And you'll see a list of APIs here. And in particular, there's one called Hubs API. And this is pretty much the Node.js SDK for retrieving exactly what I just did then, but with Postman. So same thing, fetch requests, good old standard HTTP. Okay, just for reference. But we're going to keep it much simpler than that because we've got APIs. So how do we go from here? Let me just shrink the screen a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is you're going to click on the list hubs and projects on a Learn Forge, have a read through this, and then skip to the Node.js part. And now we're going to start creating that next route that I mentioned. This is going to be for the data management API. So that API that I just mentioned, that I just showed you with Postman, that one here, this is the data management set of APIs. So let's copy paste that. Well, before we copy paste, we need to create this file. So let's create datamanagement.js under routes. So let me just move this over here for you. Put this over here. Maybe just shrink this a little bit, get more room. And let's stop all of this. Okay, and we want to create a data management file. So got those two files. Let's take another look. Oops. Let's hide the details here. So under routes, we're going to add a new file directly under here called data management. And that's going to create our file. It's not under common, it's by itself. And then we're going to essentially add some endpoints that says, when my browser makes a request for the data management endpoint, return me back a list of projects, files, folders, essentially a tree structure. Now, we want a particular sort of tree structure to match tree.js. So we're using a library called tree.js with jQuery. Oh, did I misspell that? Nope, tree.js. And that requires a very special JSON structure so it can do its thing. So you give it this JSON structure and it gives you back a nice tree, a tree list like this. So let's create a route and some JavaScript code that will retrieve the hubs, the projects, the folders, the folder contents, the versions, and then let it return it back to tree.js so it can so we can render that into HTML for us. So that's essentially what this method is going to be doing here. So let's just copy that to the clipboard, paste it in, and we'll go through it very quick. A couple of important things here. So our route, the route is now /datamanagement. We need to re-enable that route in our start.js code. So we need to do that one. And then when I do a curl command to go to data management, it's going to be looking for an ID. And then from that ID, it's going to decode it. It's going to look for whether it is a hubs ID, a project's ID, a folder ID, and in a switch statement. And then it's going to go and retrieve using our Node.js SDK. It's going to retrieve that data. So we don't have this project yet, but we're about to add it. So that's going to be coming up in a second. Okay, so get projects, get folders, get folder contents, which is the files, and then, is the top folder, and then get items, which will get us the versions. Nearly got that right. If you're given a project, get all the folders. If you're given a folder, get all the files. And if you're given a file, get all of its versions. That's all it's doing. Pretty straightforward. Alrighty. Last part is to add a little bit of code for the actual methods for calling our SDK. So, for example, we're going to at some point need to get those hubs, and we do that with a now with the SDK calls. We have to fill in these methods basically. Okay, so now let's copy this code, and we're going to paste it to the bottom of our file. Oops, there we go. Just scroll to the bottom, copy, paste, save, and it's going to export our router yeah, and then once it's retrieved the hubs from our SDK, from the Node.js SDK, it's going to format it a little bit differently and create a JSON structure using this create tree node that's specifically designed for the tree.js jQuery control that we're going to use in the browser. Okay, so that's the general gist of it. So you saw how I retrieved the hubs before in this Postman request. We want to format this into a structure that is nice and neat for tree.js. If it's going to come up this time. No. For this thing. And so it's going to format that list of hubs for us really nicely. Okay. So far, so good. Oops, let me just juggle my screens around. And I didn't see any questions yet. All right, so far so good. Now let's finish actually let's run this real quickly just to make sure we see some results here. So I'm going to save that and I'm going to hit the play button. We've got our server listening, Now let's do a quick curl command. And we're going to do, you guys remember what the route was again? Routes, data management, and it's API forward. So it should be just data management. All right, see what happens. Now I don't have an ID, so it's going to return back a 500. Whoop. Or at least it's going to try. Let's just stop that. Whoops. There we go. There we go. So it's looking for a query result here, and it's undefined. So it's actually running because it's not using a browser; it's using a curl script. So let's cheat a little bit here. Cheat a little bit here and put in a parameter ID 1234 just for the sake of the argument, so we don't cause it to completely go ballistic. So it's going to try and return something, and it's failing. Okay, we shouldn't be doing it that way, but you get the idea. It's calling our endpoint here. Okay. Now, next part is we want to add the user route. So this is where we, when we log in, and I'll just go back to the example here. When we log in, we want to display the profile picture in the top left here and the person's name. And to do that, we use the Forge API's user endpoints. And you can find those. Let's see if I've got an example here. You can find them on the Forge documentation website. Okay, so to do that, scroll down to user information, click on that, choose Node.js, and this one's pretty straightforward. We're going to create a new file, routes.user. Okay, just make sure line this up so they're right. So under the routes folder again, we're going to create user.js. And yeah, we're going to add this code. Again, it's very straightforward. We're reusing our common Oauth code, and that's got particularly it's got a user profile API command that we want to call. So over in our common code here, we should see. Oops, wrong one. We want to get the where's it gone? Lost it. I guess we want to get something from here, but get client. I guess we're just getting our token. Yeah. Okay. We're going to need something. We're going to need the session. Okay. So we also need the router because we've got a new route, and our code needs to be exported as a module. And then for the profile, once we've got our access token, we are going to call the get user profile command from the SDK, and it's going to return back a profile object. Inside the profile object, there'll be a URL for the there'll be a username, first name, last name, and we're just going to concatenate that as a string. And then there's going to be in the profile body, profile images, there's going to be a list of URLs with different image sizes of that person's image. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just create a JSON object that we're going to pass back to the browser, and it knows what to do with it from there. We're going to make it display that image, that URL. Okay, so let's try that out. Let's see how that looks from a request. Now remember, I can't actually get that access token yet because I haven't built the login panel, etc. So far all we can do is just call these endpoints with, say, a curl script, and see with debugging we can see that it's hitting those endpoints. But without getting an access token, it's hard to actually test these endpoints and see results. So we'll do that in the next session. Okay, so let's rerun this service and let's do a quick curl script to our user endpoint, testing that last piece. So this one is user/profile. So do user/profile. Put a breakpoint on here just to make sure we're not missing anything. That would be, if you don't see a breakpoint, it's probably because you have not added the route like I have. So let's add the route. Okay, so add the route, restart that server, and now try to put a breakpoint. There we go, we can see our breakpoint. So let's put this up here. I hit enter. Great, the curl script has triggered the breakpoint. There's no session, unfortunately. And so it's not going to be able to get a internal token, and it's going to error out, which it's not doing a very good job of at the moment. Okay, so that is it for session 4. If you can get to that point, that will be awesome. We've got a few minutes left for anything you want me to dive deeper into code-wise. So we can cover something in the data management API if you like, or get hubs, get projects, or I can do a little bit more explanation of the data management API itself. Or if you'd like me to demo something completely different, let me know. Okay, so with that, you are going to add your router data management endpoints and your user endpoints. Okay, one more quick thing. Hopefully hopefully this doesn't happen to you. Okay, so over to you guys. Your turn. I'll leave you to coding up this next section and adding 2 routes, one for data management, one for user. And then if you've got time for lunch, if you manage to screen through that, which would be pretty straightforward, we'll get to the last part, which brings this all together, which is the JavaScript side of things. Again, any troubles, you can ask questions, click on the Q&A button. I see a question now. And what else was I going to mention? That's it. I'll leave you guys to it. Grab some lunch and yeah, get into that code. Okay, question. Not sure if I missed at some point, but do we have to download something for curl? Is that a requirement? No, not at all. Curl is something that you can use wget or curl, either one. If you're running Windows, you may have to install either one of those commands, wget or curl. And they just a simple command line tool, simple bash tool to help you debug and essentially test HTTP endpoints. So this, for example, using curl here, you can see that triggers this endpoint, and I can do the same with wget. And we'll turn off verbose. Oops. You can see it triggers the same thing. So these are just testing tools. Again, you don't actually have to run. They're not required. They're literally just to help you as a developer test your code and test your system and see if it works. You can also do this in a browser. So that same request here, localhost 300. Instead of using a curl command, you could use literally go to a browser and go to the address bar, and then type in localhost 3000 APF forge, etc. And then that'll also trigger this breakpoint. So when I press enter, you'll see that it's triggering it, and we'll see what happens in the response here when I hit play. Absolutely nothing. It's spinning because there's missing information. All right. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay. So yeah, there's 3 ways to test these endpoints: curl scripts, wget, or literally using a browser and putting in the endpoint. Okay. I will see you back here at 2 p.m. Any questions? Hit that Q&A button and I will be right here. Okay. Okie dokie. All right, guys, ladies and gentlemen, we are back and we are coming up to the 2 p.m. mark. It's 1:58 p.m. and just a couple minutes and we'll come back to the last session for day 2 of the Forge Bootcamp. Okie dokie. So I don't see any extra questions. I think you guys must be doing pretty well. No significant problems, and you're just cruising through this really well, which is great. There was a question earlier about whether to use the curl command wasn't working, and that's probably because you might have been on Windows and it wasn't installed. You'd have to install that one. Other than that, I think we pretty much covered the questions for listing hubs, projects, and files. So let's do it. Let's go to the last session, session 4. You're nearly there. Okay, so session 4, we will be finishing up the day with loading models in the viewer. So this is Forge Viewer, and this is essentially that magic last piece that really brings this whole demo together. So, from the animation from the first session, we've got our panel on the left and our panel on the right, toolbar, and the left side, once you log in, the left side shows our tree.js, and you can see files and folders appearing. But on the right side, we'll see a little bit of magic, and we'll see Forge Viewer load into place. So this is it. This is the last piece where we actually have all of our HTML, and we have the client-side component, which really just finishes off the user interface, which we're completely missing so far. We're literally just using curl as our client. All right. So you guys ready? You gonna give me a raise hands to let me know you can hear me and everything's working? Yep, I got one. Anyone else? 2, excellent. 3, excellent. Cool. All righty, let's do it. Here we go. So no questions so far, so good. So last step, we're going to create the front end piece. So we'll need to create an index.html file that'll be sitting in the public folder, which goes right. If you can remember, let me share a portion of the screen. If you remember, we had a public folder, and in the public folder, it was pretty empty. So public folder is where we're going to be hosting our static web pages. And here they are. So index.html, that's our landing page. For CSS styling, we're going to create a main.css, and we'll use, we're going to use that to style the navigation bar and the panels to get everything to look nice. And a couple of icon things as well. Then we'll kick over to the JavaScript code, and this is where we'll use the tree.js control, and we'll have a thing called Forge Tree, which effectively controls everything on that left-hand pane. That's going to be forgetree.js, and that's going to talk to our server and get what it needs to render that tree view. And then the last file is the Forge Viewer. So this is where we're going to load Forge Viewer. Forge Viewer is going to get an access token from our server and a URN based on whatever it is we clicked on in the Forge tree. So they're the 4 files we're going to be working on next. So let's do it. Demo time. How hard can it possibly be, right? Cool. To get started, we are going to create a under the public folder, we're going to create a new index file. But before we do anything at all, what I need to do is show you guys where to find this info and how to follow along. So if you remember LearnForge.autodesk.io, We've gotten so far, we've got to translate the file, and then we're really basically up to this part here, show viewer. So let me just step through that last, oops, sorry, wrong one. Let me just step through this last one. So we were here, we went through the user part, and then next is show on viewer. All right, and we're doing this in Node.js. So not really a whole lot to get wrong here. It's really just all client side. All right, so we're going to create some files. Let's start with the most important one. Arguably the most important one is the index.html file. All right, so let's start with that one. Under public folder, create a new file. We're going to call it index.html. And in there, we are going to do the usual things. We're going to have a header, footer. I'm going to move this over a little bit. And I'll explain it. We'll need a header. And we'll need a body. And we'll need to wrap it up with HTML. So that's our basic HTML page. And if I put in, let's say, in the body, oops, I'm missing a closed bracket on the body here. If I put in the body, oops, that's what's going on there. If I put in the body here, if I put in, say, hello world, and I put it in, that out of the way. If I put that in, say, an H1 header, like that, I hit save. I could quickly preview it in just a general web page, or I can get our server to actually serve this page. Because if you remember correctly, at the very beginning when we created the start.js file, we had this little line here, line 13, app use express static, and then path public. So this basically created a static file, a static website. So if we run this server now with that index file in the public folder, so I'll just go check that's running. Whoa. Okay. I think I must have typed something badly. Let's try that again. Launch program is already running. Do you want to start another instance? No, I think that's why. Okay, I just need to kill some instances here. Let's stop my instance and start it again. All right, back in business. So now if I open up a browser at port localhost 3000, we should see hello world, which is what we expected to see from our index file. Now just for fun, so you can see that in the background there, if I change that index HTML file like 1234 hello there world, hit save, then I hit refresh, you can see that our static web page index.html file is working just fine. Okay, cool. So far, so good. So let's add some extra bits and pieces. So let's go through a little bit of this one by one. First of all, we kind of want all of our CSS and styling and some of the link information. We want that in the header. We're going to load a couple of different things here. We're going to load a version of jQuery because the tree control, Tree.js uses jQuery under the hood. For styling, we're going to use Bootstrap, and that's just to give us some nice dialog boxes, some nice spacing, and a good header. We're going to use JS tree, as I mentioned. And then we're going to use the bootstrap.min, something else going on here. Not sure why there's, oh, I'm sorry, that's jQuery. This is also the JS file, and I'm looking at the style sheet. You know what? How about we just copy this over because it's so hard to read on this little screen. Okay, let's do that. So drop that in the header. And here we go. It's a little bit easier to read. So yeah, JS tree's there, Bootstrap's there, jQuery's there, and our styling is there. Bootstrap min, style for JS tree. So all of our styling is all set up. The next thing we need to add is the Forge viewer itself. And the Forge viewer is made up of two bundled files. First one is that the Forge viewer, to style all of its toolbars and its pop-ups and things, it uses its own style sheet, and that's this one here, style.min.css under the model derivative endpoint. And then the second file is the actual JavaScript. So the 3D engine, which is powered under the hood by an old version of Three.js, version 71, that is this file here, viewer 3d.min.js. You can take a look at that if you like. You can just simply look at all the source code for Forge Viewer. It's easy to access. Just put that in a browser, and you can see it's minified. It's a bit of a mess. If you want to read the full version of it without minification, just take off the .min, and you'll see a full bundled version that's not compressed, not minified, I should say. So you'd be able to find things like, how to do walk through somewhere in there. Let's see if it comes up. Still loading. There we go. It's still looking. I'll just shrink this down a little bit. Let's do walk. Oh, still loading. See, it's a pretty big file. Let's maybe try to find, oh, there we go. Found something. 73 versions of walk. There you go. So the BIM walk tool, for example, to be able to walk around that I showed you in BIM 360, there it is there. And you can find more and more bits and pieces of the code throughout. All right, so that's a neat little trick. If you need to understand what's going on under the hood in the Forge viewer, you can take a look at the raw source code. The shaders are also there. So let's see, scale. This is a command. See if it comes up. It's got something. Okie dokie. It's pretty slow. Yeah. Definitely load this in a browser. Don't use the, load it in an IDE like Visual Studio. Don't load it in a browser. It's too slow. All right, let's keep going. So we have the header part, and we've loaded Forge Viewer source code and the styling, and then we've got a couple of other things here. We've got our own CSS file which we have to create, and then we have a Forge tree, which is the code that controls the tree control and all the navigation on the left. And then the last one is we need a little bit of extra code to kick off the Forge Viewer, and that's our code that's going to say when it receives a message from Forge tree. So Forge tree, I click on a file or a version, and I'll just show you what that is again over here. So our tree view control on the left here. Here it is here. The Forge tree controls let you drill down. And then finally, when you actually click on a file, we detect it, and we send over a signal to forgeviewer.js that listens for that. And in that message is a special URN, and it's Forge Viewer is going to use that URN to load our file. Okie dokie. So this is it. Let's do one more quick thing. Let's grab the rest of the body here. This is a whole lot of Bootstrap code for doing setting up a navigation bar at the top. If you remember seeing this navigation bar, this one at the top, then has two panels, a small column 4 on the left, this one, which is our tree control, and then another one on the right for Forge Viewer column 8, and that's where we put in Forge Viewer. So take note of this ID. With ID equals Forge Viewer, we're going to be using that to get that document. Just something to keep note of. All the rest of it is pretty straightforward HTML. So let's just copy that and paste it, save us a lot of time. Okay, first file out of the way. Let's go to the next one. Some basic CSS. Again, copy this, create a new file called main.css under the same folder. So under public, create a new file, main.css, and then copy paste that CSS. And you should see that matches, oops, actually I was supposed to put it under /CSS, so let's fix that. create a folder called CSS and drop that under there. There we go, fixed. Okay, dokie. So now that's done. One more to do is under the JS folder. So there's two more, I should say. There's a JS folder with tree and viewer. So let's do that. Under public, new folder, JS. Right click, new file, forge tree, JS, and forge viewer.js. Alrighty. I am going to cover Forge Viewer first because it's shorter and it's probably more interesting. So Forge Viewer, this is kind of if you don't need anything fancy and you just need to see the Forge Viewer, this is pretty much the code you're going to need. This covers the basic Forge Viewer API. When this method is called, it's going to take in a URN, and that is the seed file, or the drawing file, I should say. That's the points effectively to the SVF resources, the manifest. And then there's a second variable called the viewable ID. So if you just happen to have a Revit file that has a 3D view and maybe say 4 or 5 2D sheets, and you want to view, you want to choose one of those. You want to choose either the 3D view or maybe one of those 2D sheets as the thing to view. Then you're going to specify a viewable ID. If you don't specify it, no problem. It's going to use the default view, because Revit, when you save a Revit file, it's already got a default view, usually the 3D view. And so if this is null, if this value is null, no problem. It's going to just load the default geometry. That's what's going on here. So viewer comes in here. We get down to the viewable section. If the viewable ID is null, then it's going to get the root and find by viewable. Actually, if it doesn't look right. Yeah, basically, if it's null, it's going to use this. Otherwise, it's going to use this one. Sorry, if it's null, it's going to use this one. All right. Some important things in this code here. So when we launch the viewer, there's a couple of things that are worth noting here. One is the environment variable is Autodesk production. The API we're using is derivative v2. This is going to change. The environment and API will change if you want to use SVF2. You can find more information on the blog post. And then the other thing is this callback function called getAccessToken. This is a callback function for retrieving an access token. In this case, it's going to call our server with a fetch request, and it's going to ask our server at that endpoint that we were playing with earlier and say, please give me back an access token. In which case, it gets the access token, parses it as JSON, and then returns our callback function with the access token and the expiry value, and which is what Forge Viewer needs. It's going to need that access token and the expiry to, well, it just needs the access token really, to have permission to retrieve the URN assets. So far, so good. All right, next part, Initialize Forge Viewer, Initializer. This is where the Forge Viewer starts. It hasn't loaded anything yet. There's no loading going on, but setting up the canvas, getting the element. So this is where that get element by ID was for the HTML. We need to supply that HTML element. That's it here. And then any extensions. So in this case, there's an extension called Document Browser. In the next session, I believe, or sorry, I think it's next session. There's a session on dashboards, day 3 or 4. They cover how to create one of these extensions. So if this is where you wanted to add your own toolbar icon, or you wanted to add some new custom functionality, maybe do a split view, comparison thing. I don't know, maybe you want to make a web VR thing. This is where you would do it. You would code an extension and then separately have another file over here that contains all the extension code. Extensions are just a nice way to modularize your code without understanding what on earth is being done under the hood. So I have no idea what Document Browser does under the hood. I know if I add it, it comes up with this cool little button. Keeps it simple. Okie dokie. Next part. So once we've initialized the viewer, we set it up for using a user interface control. There's a headless version. And the next part is we start the viewer. This is where we now have all of the WebGL resources and we want to activate it. And then we've got to tell Forge Viewer, hey, I want you to load a document ID. If it's successful, it's the manifest. Give us a callback on the document load success. And then finally, I want to load my node. So my that URN resource and that particular viewable. Now that I've got the manifest, now I want to load a particular viewable, and that's where I do load document node. This is also, ironically, this is also how, if you call this more than once, and you've got a flag that says keep these drawings around, don't unload them, then you can do multi-model loading. And so you can basically load 2 or 3 buildings in a scene. And that's how you do it with this. Just keep calling this function and it will keep loading more and more models. Okay, and that's pretty much it. That's it for Forge Viewer. It's pretty straightforward. It's the bare bones for Forge Viewer. The next part is we're going to add that tree control on the left. Tree control, nothing too exciting in this code. Bit of jQuery. When the document's ready, let's just copy it and paste it as a Forge tree.js. Basically, when a document's ready, we're going to do an AJAX call to get a token. If it's successful, then we're going to we know we're signed in, and then we'll update the buttons to show to make it show, hey, you've logged in. If you want to sign out, click on the sign out button. Also a refresh hubs button, we better show that. And then we want to add a click event to the sign out, which is basically doing the sign out call. This is where we do a sign out. There's a refresh tab. This is going to refresh button. This is going to basically call JS tree to say do a refresh. That's built in. And then finally, this is where we actually load and populate the tree view control and we show the user. Let's take a quick look at show user because it's pretty simple. Show user is going to basically call our server, and that's that curl script that we looked at before, API forge user profile. If it's successful, it's going to get back that profile variable, which is what we got here, name and picture. And we're going to create a string called image source and an image size. So it's an image element in HTML. And we're going to give it the URN that we got back from the server. And then we're going to also just concatenate these two things, the image value and the profile name. So you're going to have an image and then the person's name right next to it. So far, so good. And then last but not least is the tree view control. So this one's a little trickier. I'll save this one to last. Essentially, JS tree takes in a whole lot of values and a whole lot of parameters. I'm not going to really cover them too much. Just very briefly, you'll specify all the icons you want to appear. So for example, if you want a BIM 360 icon to appear as the hub, then this is it here, BIM 360 hubs, and that's the icon for it there. You can click on it, take a quick look. Looks like that B symbol. You get the idea. Okay, and then yeah, really just setting all of this up. So when you click on the sort button, or when the tree control binds to a node, it's got to do something. So in other words, if you click on a node in the JS tree, you're going to get this event. And then what do you want to do when that happens? Well, in our case, if you click on things, if you click on the hub or the folder, we don't really care, but we do care if it's a version. So in other words, when you drill all the way down and you get to a version, that's when we want to actually do something. And in this case, when we get a version, we want to launch Forge Viewer. And so that's when we call the launch viewer code, and that's going to trigger the Forge Viewer launch code, which I mentioned here. And that's going to start Forge Viewer. So that's pretty much how it's going to work. Should we take a little look and see what it looks like? I think so. I think we're pretty much ready to go. So let's take a look. And we can click on running your app too. Hopefully we get this one. Let's do it. Okay. Let's refresh and let's take a look. Oh, I forgot to mention the login button. There is a login button, which is important. So the login button, if I can see it, is hiding in this panel. Oh, actually the login button is here. And it's here. Here we go. So when it, when you click on that login button, it's going to call this API function. It's going to call our server and ask, hey, give me the URL I need to use to redirect the browser to the login page, the Autodesk login page. So let's see that in action, actually. Let's just kick off our server and test this out. Localhost 3000. So far, so good. It's already asking for a token because it doesn't know whether it's authorized or not. So let's see what happens. It's going to say I'm not authorized. And so it's going to return a 401. And then the browser is going to keep this login button appearing. So let's see what happens. Let me just remove everything around a little bit here so you can see it in action. Okay, so I click on continue. And nothing's changed. That's good. That means that it didn't have to unhide this button. So now let's see what happens when I click on the login button. I'm going to put a breakpoint on the get auth, which is this one here. So this is where my index file, my forge tree control, hang on a second. No, this is where I'm going to just basically get a URL to redirect to. So when I click on this, in the login button, which is over here, sign in button, it's just called this API in the browser. And it's now calling, let me go, I've lost it. It's now calling Oauth, and it's going to generate this string. It's going to give it back to the browser, and it's going to tell the browser to redirect based on here. So it's going to say location href, go to this crazy URL. So let's see it in action. Here we go. It's checking to see if there's a session, and it's going to try to generate one, get public access token, because it looks like I have already logged in. So that's not a great test. It's already working for me. So that's not quite what I wanted, because I've obviously got a session token. I've got a cookie in my computer. So let's run this again, but this time from a private window that doesn't have any session cookies in it. So let's do that again. I go here. It's going to return a 401. It's not logged in. Great. Now when I click on the sign in button, something different this time. I click on play. It's redirecting me now to the sign in page. And this is where the three-legged handshake occurs. So now I'm going to log in, Michael, and I'm going to enter a crazy long password. You can ignore this. You guys won't see this unless you're an Autodesk employee. And you certainly won't see this. Okay. Alrighty. Now it's just logged in. I've logged in with my account, username and password. It's now going to try to get an authorization token. It won't be in the cache. So it'll now be in the cookie, and we've now got a session, and you can see I've logged in. Great. So I can see all my A360 accounts, but I don't see any BIM 360 accounts, and so that's going to be next. Okay, so this is data management now. I'll just move this over a little bit so you can see what's going to happen here. So this is where I'm just expanding this window, and it's going to call our data management server, and it's going to ask for what I'm at a hub level. Give me all of the projects inside the hub. So it's now gonna, it's called, it's already called get hubs earlier. Now it's gonna call something else. In this case, it's gonna call get projects, because the resource name, which we're about to find out, is hubs. There we go. And it's got a resource ID of that one. It's .a dot, which means A360. Click on that. It's going to call the Node.js SDK to get the projects. Let's just take a little peek. It's going to do that. It returns, and it's going to resolve that. I'm just going to hit play, and it expands and gets my list of projects. Didn't want to actually jump into that API client. So there it is. That's what I was looking for. So yeah, breakpoint on this one. You know what? I'll just do that with a different project really quickly. If I click on this one, we'll see the same thing, except this time I'll make sure I go to get projects. So you can see it's stepping through. We're going to get to get projects again. Let's jump into get projects. Not quite what I wanted. Go to definition. There we go. Put a breakpoint on that one and hit play. There we go. So at get projects, it's going to return back a JSON object with some callbacks, and it's going to return. Oh, stop a second. It's going to return back a JSON object, which we're going to map. Oh, no, there's no projects on Atoms. That's no good. Let's try a different one. Tutorial team. All right, one more time. Okay. We'll put a breakpoint on here so we can see the result. There we go. So return back data. It's got a body, and it's got some data on it. It's got 4 items. Here they are. It's got attributes like a name. There's one called t-test. Let's just run it and run it again. Let it finish. And now you can see it's populated this set of projects. If I click on this again, it's going to go to folders. And I'm just going to really skip ahead here. Go to folders, hit run, and you can see now it's got a folder here. And it's got my 2 files here. So I'm not sure if you remember from earlier when I was using A360, this is actually my A360 hub. And I'll just quickly sign in again. I'll sign into A360. And there's my t-test project folder. And I can see my 2 files. And that was that one particular file that I had before. It was a chair. So this is A360. So let's go back to my little demo page and see what happens when I expand the item and I get the versions. And here it is there. When I click on this now, I'm expecting it to launch Forge Viewer. So I click on it. It's going to check if there's a auth token. There is. Sends it to Forge Viewer. Forge Viewer gets a URN, and now I've got my 3D object in the scene. And all the fun things are in here, like explode, like properties, and what else? All sorts of fun things. All of our styling for menus and coloring, etc. Okay. So what's missing here? There is one thing that is missing, and that is BIM 360. So let's take a look at the missing piece here before I jump to questions. Oh, viewer extensions, that is coming up next. But first thing we want to do is actually give permission to BIM 360 to be able to view my hub. So BIM 360 by default doesn't allow anyone to just log into a BIM 360 project. Your Forge Viewer app, that Forge app, has to be given permission to use a project. And so the way we do that is under the admin of BIM 360, which I'm not seeing here. So I'm going to have to switch accounts real quick. Let me change this one. Let's go to something that I do have access to. So you're going to need a special, very high-level admin access to allow this. So under BIM 360, you're going to be looking for account admin. And then from account admin, you're going to do custom integrations and add custom integration. BIM 360 account. You're going to say I'm the developer. It's going to ask you to remember this BIM 360 account ID, which I'm not going to do. Well, I am going to do, but not right now. And then I'm going to take the Forge client ID, which, if you guys remember, is hiding in the launch.js. So this is my client ID. Add that one. Drop that in here. I give this an app name, and I'm going to call it Tutorial Tuesday 2021. And just a quick example of how to give my Forge app permission to access this BIM 360 hub. Okay, hit save. That's it. Now, fingers crossed, if I now go back to my demo page, not this one, but my other demo page, which is hiding in another window, this one, we should hopefully see when I hit the refresh, it will requery the server and get a list of hubs, and we should see a new hub appear. So let's hit refresh. Let me take some of these breakpoints away. Don't really need them now. Just move these out the way. So you can see it all in action. Hit play. Now you can see I've got this new B icon, and that is going to match this one here. So I'm using the Autodesk Forge partners. I've got my list of all of the projects in here. I'm kind of interested in my projects, so I'm going to use this one, project demo MB, and we're going to go to the document management. I'm in the get out of admin here. And you can see I've got a whole bunch of files and folders, and let's see what happens when I go to my demo now. I can expand this window to the left, and I'll hit play. Don't really need to see projects and folders anymore. Hit play. It's given me all my projects, and the one I'm interested in was this one. Don't need to see folders anymore. It's given me folders, and you can see that matches what I've got here, plans and projects. And so now when I expand project files, I should hopefully see a few more of these files. And I do. I can see I got a whole bunch here, as well as some extra files. There's 3 files in the base of this folder. So you can kind of see this view here. I've got that same list is this same list here. Now, if I want to view one of these, say if I want to view one of these BIM 360 files, all I need to do is just click on, say, this one here, tests, and maybe just load up maybe this one here. I'll just double click on that, or click on that once, and I can see a model from BIM 360 loading up in my demo site. And that should hopefully match what I've got here in test. And I'm just going to load this one. Same thing. Let me just move that out the way. And with a bit of luck, you should see this loading. There it is. So that's BIM 360, and this is my demo website. And there it is. That's all there is to it. Do a quick slice to see what's going on. All looks pretty good. Click on things, get the properties. It's all there. And so that's the basics. We're not covering Forge Viewer in this session, but in tomorrow's session, when you guys cover extensions and dashboarding, you're going to dig a lot more into the Forge Viewer and the Forge Viewer APIs. So, you know, how do you add, how do you get properties? How do you do selection and isolation, coloring, all those things that you'll cover tomorrow. So with that, I believe we are pretty much done covering the material. Let me get back to slides and make sure you guys are ready. So that was demo time. And now it's over to you. So if I've still got everyone, yep, your turn. I'm going to get you to create that index.html file, the main CSS, the Forge tree, Forge viewer, and if you're using BIM 360, now you know how to set up the app integration. If you have any trouble with the app integration, you can always, if you don't have permission, I should say, to a BIM 360 admin page, you can always use A360 as an alternative. Okay, fortunately, I lost a question. I got a question. Unfortunately, I lost this last section. How can we access the recordings? Yeah, so for recordings, we're going to send out a recording after this session. It'll be probably won't be until tomorrow morning or European time tomorrow morning. So yeah, that we will be sending out the recordings, just not not immediately after this presentation. So yeah, hopefully that's got enough. Hopefully the recording will cover the bits you're missing. If you like, I can quickly cover. If you think there's something I missed, you'd like me to cover again, I can quickly go through it right now. Okay, so with that, are there any questions? If not, I'm going to quickly cover a couple more things. And then I'm just going to be basically hanging around for a little while just to answer any questions you've got for the next half an hour or so. So actually not half an hour, for the next hour till about 3:30 and maybe 4 if there's still people around. Okay, so tomorrow you'll be covering, if you guys are staying around, tomorrow you'll be covering dashboards. I believe Jaime's covering this one. And that's basically what I was saying before. This is where you're going to dig deeper into the Forge viewer itself and extend it, create an extension, add some dashboarding so you can literally count all of the objects in a scene and calculate their total volume, and then maybe do a calculation on that to do a quantity takeoff kind of stuff. And then last but not least, on Thursday, you'll be doing, if you guys are interested in design automation, this is where we run Autodesk Revit in the cloud, or Autodesk Inventor, or Autodesk AutoCAD. We run those in the cloud, and design automation is a service that allows you to take control of those servers and do stuff with them. So it's pretty powerful stuff. Alrighty. Also, if you want to get further support, you can go to Stack Overflow and just use one of these tags. If specifically you're having trouble with Forge Viewer or the model derivative service, if you know, put that in there. Otherwise, just keep it generic, say Autodesk Forge. We check that channel a lot. We find it's a really good place to contribute back to the community whenever you guys have got questions. All right, and I think I've got another question here. I want to try to sign into, we got a few questions. All right. So I'm not going to disappear just yet. Don't worry. It's okay. Let's answer some of these questions. All right. All righty. So question 1, I'm saying that I'll answer this one and say, recordings will be available sometime tomorrow. Okie dokie. When I try to sign into Autodesk, I get the following error. Looks like something is not right. Please contact your admin. 400 invalid redirect URL. Okay. And then a second question, which I might be able to help answer as well. Why don't you make the viewer library code open source and open for contribution? How are you going to send us the recordings, through email or how? Because I did not get it yesterday. Okay, so to answer the second one, for getting recordings. If for whatever reason you do not get an email, Festum, send me an email. I'm just sending you my email address publicly. So any of you guys have trouble accessing that recording, just send me, or if you don't get an email with an update about this training session stuff, if you're not getting, for some reason they're not coming through, please send me an email directly, and I can make sure that you do get, we don't want to lose contact with you. So please send me an email directly, and I can make sure that you get access to those recordings and any other emails if for some reason something's not working. Okay, and then the first question from Festum, why did you make the viewer library code open source and open for contribution? That is a fantastic question. I would love to talk more about that one. One of the problems with Forge Viewer is that it is on a very old version. It is on version 71. The current viewer, the current version of Three.js is like version 124 or something like that. We're very far behind. We've tried for a number of years to try to bring it up to scratch, to bring it up to latest, and we haven't been successful. But we will be having some news on that soon, which I can't wait to tell you about, which is going to make life a lot easier for us to contribute some of the stuff back to the community. Yeah, unfortunately, it's been a real sore point. We've been contributing code, but to an old version, which no one really cares about. So yeah, we'd love to contribute to the latest Three.js and get on board. I could talk all day about that one, and yeah, it's very disheartening. It's very disheartening that we can't seem to contribute to the latest version. All right, let's kick back to the first question, which so what does it mean if when I try to sign into Autodesk, I get the following error. It looks something like this. Something's not right. So let me try to reproduce that error. So what you're seeing right now is not this, which you'd like to see. Instead, you'd like to see this, but instead what you're seeing is more likely, there's one of two things, but it's effectively the same thing. The first one is a callback. It's all boiling down to the callback is incorrect. So, or the redirection is incorrect, or the callback is incorrect. Let's see what it looks like when the callback is incorrect. So I'm just going to put in a bogus callback. I'm just going to put the XXX at the end of this, so it's going to fail. And then when I come back to here, and I'm going to just quickly log out, which is this log out button here. I hit refresh, so far so good. But when I click on this now, it's going to try to redirect me. I've got to clear my token here, actually. Let me do that again. Close my Chrome browser. And then I'm going to just quickly use a private session again. Now, when I try to log in, it's going to try to sign in. You're probably not seeing this login box. So I guess that's the first question, is if you're not seeing, if you're seeing this login box and then you log in, which I'll just do again. You're going to see, I'll just quickly log in. You're going to see a redirection. Oh, no, not quite, nearly. And it'll try to redirect, and then it's going to hopefully fail. Oh, it's not failing. I forgot to restart the server. My bad. Let me restart the server. There we go. So it's going to restart, and it's going to provide a bad callback URL. So when I log out, and then I log back in, it comes up with this. Oops, looks like something's not right. And so that's probably what you're seeing. You're seeing an invalid redirect URL. So that is most likely because of, as I was showing you, back to launch.json. Take a look in your launch.json file and just double check that this is correct. And then, I mean, obviously put in some garbage here, but make sure this matches the instructions from LearnForge. So let me go back to LearnForge. And you'll find the callback details. I think you'll find them here. Just make sure you copy and paste the launch.json file, launch.js JSON file, sorry, and then you should see this matching that one. So double check that. That's one area that it could be a problem. The second area, so these have to match, is if you go to Forge account, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to log back in. Oh yeah, boy, it's a logging in today. I can probably do this from my other browser, which is login. Ah, that's what happens when you close the browser and clear the cookies. Okay, so just going back to the Forge accounts. So you should be able to go to your Forge apps, click on that, and double check that your new Forge app has the correct callback URL. This one has to match. Let me just scroll up and show you. This one has to match the callback URL of this one. And that's for security and authentication reasons. If they don't match, then you're going to get an error, like invalid redirection or something went wrong, problem with the code. So hopefully that answers your question. And I'll just put a type answer. Check callback in launch.json and also my apps for Autodesk. Alrighty. Let me know if that answers your question. I know that's a tricky one. If you still have problems, let me know and I can take control of your computer and we can solve it, fix it live. But just let me know. Okie dokie. Next question. What does it mean if I don't see custom integrations on my account admin page? I am an admin. Huh. It could mean that you're using, that's a good question. I don't know. Are you using BIM 360 or are you using ACC? Because they do have a different user interface to get to that same stuff. So let me just get out of this one. Make sure that's restarted. Make sure I can sign in and get my hubs again. Yep. So if I can't see my custom integration, if you can let me know if you're using, I can see there's a chat here. Okay, I'm getting the error, not able to see the login box. BIM 360, okay, cool. So if you're not seeing that account admin page, so double check that you're actually going to the right admin page, because there's actually, it's kind of confusing. There's actually a project admin and an account admin. Just double check that you're actually going to the account admin and not the project admin. If you go to the project admin, you won't see anything useful here. And then if you go to the account admin and you go under settings, I should have mentioned that. So under settings, then go to custom integrations. So maybe I need to double check that again. So this is with okay. It's alive. Okay, my settings only shows profile business units, admin activity. Huh. Profile business unit. Huh. No custom integrations. And you're the admin. Huh. Good question. I do not know. What I'm going to get you to do though, if not showing for you. I'm trying to think why that would why that would not be showing. Okay, so it is working for JK. Oh, cool, great. JK, excellent. But back to anonymous attendee. I'm not quite sure why my settings, it's not showing the custom integrations page. And I'm also not completely sure how to fix it in this short time. I would need to reach out to some of the other folks from the Bin 360 team. In fact, let me just do that while I answer some other questions real quick. So hold on to that thought, and I will quickly reach out to someone who might know the answer. Hold on. Looking for So the only thing I can think of is there's perhaps a permissions thing going on for your admin page. So if your admin account, and then maybe there's something in your admin account. So let me think if I can maybe help here with. No, not gonna let me do it. The question with ACC, it does exist also in ACC. It's going to require another account though. Okay, I guess if they have less than 200 users, they need to ask for it. Not sure about the number. Huh. Okay, so apparently if you have okay. Okay, yes. It's in the docs, and I'm just getting you the link. Hang on a second. Yeah, essentially, if there's less than 200 users, then you need to to contact the support email, and they can the Bin 360 support team, and then they can activate that missing button. I'll just get you the link. Here it is, found it. Okay, so this is the answer, type in answer. So this is the email to contact. We're gonna let me send it. There we go. Answered. There we go. Yeah, that's the email to contact to request access if for some reason that's not showing up. Yep. And yeah. Okay, I'm just checking to see if there's any other extra information you need. Okay. And that's the same too, actually. Use the same email address for ACC as well, just to be on any, just so there's no confusion. Okie dokie. There's also a little bit more detail in this page. Let me just find you the button for this one. Type answer. Ah, you found the same one. This is an alternative one, so I'll send this one as well. Okay. Okay, and you can find more information too for hang on just a second, let me just come right back. Hold on a second. Okay. Yeah, so to answer those questions, if you're not seeing that integration, the add integration button, then send an email to the email that I sent in the answers and just make a request with the details, your account ID, etc. Just follow steps 1, 2, and 3 on that page. Let me share the screen. That would help. So this is under the BIM 360 API documentation, and you've got steps 1, step 2, and step 3. And if for some reason, if you have any trouble with activating that button, then send an email to this this email with the account name and ID. And this is the same. Do the same thing if it's ACC. Okay. Are there any other questions? It sounds like you managed to get that that list displaying, which is good. Keynote D2. Just close that. Let me close that out the way. So yeah, hopefully that's everything. I will be around for the next little while, the next half an hour. I'll say till 3:30. And if you if you liked this tutorial, give me a thumbs up. Let me know. let me know that you got as far, you found this useful. And I hope you guys are at tomorrow's forward viewer extensions, and then maybe, session 4 for the design automation stuff. So with that, I think that is it. I'll put it on pause, and then I will see you guys in our next half an hour to wrap it up and say goodbye. Alrighty. See you in half an hour. I'll be around for the next half an hour. Oh, got a question. No problem. Cool.